Round of applause. And at this point, I'd like to invite the rest of my panel this afternoon. Please stay here, Dr. Lopez. I'd like Samir Abdelkrim to come in. He is the founder and founder of StartupBricks.com, and he's also a tech reporter for Africa. He's been quoted widely. Let's give him a round of applause. And then we'll also have VERONE MANKOU, who is over there from Congo, Brazzaville. He's done a great deal of work. You'll hear a little bit more about what he's done. And we've also got PHIRI. PHIRI is a health economic specialist, originally from Zimbabwe. A great friend of mine. I met him here last year during this similar meeting. And someone that we met earlier on, who is definitely a big hitter on this continent, IVOR, ICHIKOWITZ, who is the founder and executive chairman of Paramount Group, which is based in South Africa. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. And you know, this discussion can go various ways, but let's talk about reverse innovation. And I'm going to start with you, Denver. What's your understanding of what reverse innovation is?
So the term itself is almost self-explanatory. Innovation, as Carlos was mentioning earlier, is the fundamental part of growth on the continent. But when we reverse innovate, we need to think about the solutions to the problems coming from where those problems originate. And that is the key to reverse innovation, and then taking that innovation across to the rest of the world.
So it's a question of basically saying Africa has all these sorts of problems. The children can't buy toys, so let's make toys using whatever we have, those sort of things.
Yeah, pretty much. And then taking those toys to the rest of the world.
Okay.
And then commercializing that whole process.
And just coming back to you, MANKOU, I'm very interested in hearing about your story, because you have developed a tablet that will soon be launched. Tell us about that and how it came to happen.
Well, first of all, you need to know that the tablet has already been launched. And I would first like to congratulate the organizers of the New York Forum Africa. I am an assiduous guest. I've come for the past three first editions. So I was saying that VMK is the story of a group of young people who created a startup in Brazzaville dedicated to tactile tablets, smartphones, and basic phones, but they find it very difficult to work on the continent, so we had left to produce this tablet in China in 2009, and assembled in China, designed in Africa. And during all this time, we went to China to be able to collate all of our projects. And since the month of July, we have finally opened our plant at Brazzaville on the continent. We manufacture telephones, tablets, and smartwatches. And when we went to Asia, it was because Asia was the cheapest solution. But from 2007 to today, the prices in Asia have increased constantly. And just to illustrate what I'm saying, at the time, labor for our product was, the cost of it was minus 5%, and now it is about 15%.
What are you doing about that?
In Congo, it's 15% that can allow you to train people on site and to allow them to work in favor of this technology at low cost. So in this particular regard, Africa is cheaper than China, which is why we have relocated our production here. When we assembled our first phone in Congo, we tested it in China, and the Chinese were incapable of telling us which of the models were made in China and which of the models were made in Africa. So I think that from a technical standpoint, our results are obvious, but in our project, it wasn't so much technical. I've said that technique is the easiest part of the formula today. There is a psychological block, because we were telling people that we wanted to produce tablets and smartphones in Africa. Nobody believed we could, which is why it was difficult for us to find the necessary funding, because there are things things in technology that are designed for the West and not for us. So there are several Chinese enterprises that will assemble in Congo for the African market.
I'm going to come to you in a minute because I want to talk money with you about investing in projects like those. I'm very keen to hear what you're going to say about that. But Abdelkrim, Samir, tell me about what you've seen based on what you've heard MANKOU saying. Tell me about what you've seen on the continent as far as these sorts of projects are concerned, where more people are now doing projects like those on the continent rather than relying on China to provide with the technology to assemble them.
Alors, bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm honored to be here in Libreville to talk about innovation in Africa. So, in fact, Startup BRICS is based in Africa, but we also cover innovation in emerging countries such as in India, where we are physically based as well. And what I think as regards innovation in emerging countries is if we take the case of Africa, if we wonder what innovation could serve Africa tomorrow and then later be used at an international scale, there's a sort of a pathway to trade and to distribute our products tomorrow in Europe, in the US, where African technologies could be used. There are success stories. There are VMK, also M-Pesa in Eastern Europe today, but they are a minority player. And what we have, in fact, studied in emerging countries and in Asia, the Asian example is interesting to see how Asian startups, Chinese or Indian innovators have used their diaspora, their expats, as pathways, gateways, accelerators to their internationalization. And this is...
My area, the one thing I'm keenest on hearing is how these companies on the continent are actually doing. What is the state of their health? I will come to the diaspora issue in a minute, but let's just pay attention to this particular issue. Do you find that there is actually sufficient support for these companies to come from China and actually bring their work back to the continent so that the continent benefits directly from it?
Je pense qu'il y a un gros problème.
I think there is a major issue in Africa, which is funding of innovation. And this is what allows us to support and fund innovators. Of course, the role of the state is important. The state is not sufficiently present in Africa to fund innovators. And this, of course, is the public share. But there are also not many private investors. You need to know that the largest levy of funds in Africa does not exceed $2 million. And these are, when you look at the funds that are levied in the Silicon Valley, this is nothing. So there is not enough funding, but therefore we need to innovate as regards the funding for innovation. And an idea, for example, is the diaspora.
Pourquoi ne pas demain?
Why can't we tomorrow imagine how do we fund innovation in the US or in Europe? With companies such as Kickstarter, that has in fact funded millions of innovations. The idea is funded before the product is actually manufactured. So there's a lot of things that are going on there with China, of course. And all of this is part of a value chain, but why can't we imagine tomorrow 2 or 3 African Kickstarters that will allow us to fund African innovations? This is, today, this is the ancient model.
Denver, talk to me about health. Health is a real problem on the continent. People need, you're a health economist. People need good access to good health facilities. What is happening in that field? Where are the opportunities? And what more needs to be done?
So there's a lot of opportunities. And if you recall yesterday, Richard Arches did point to the fact that the new vaccine for Ebola was developed with scientists in Guinea. Now, that is a classic example of reverse innovation in that the vaccine was created here in Africa based on the challenge that we were faced with, but potentially in the future that vaccine is going to be exported to the rest of the world for use because, as we know, disease is not unique to a single geography. It can spread quite easily, especially in this age where we can get across the continent quite easily and across the world. But beyond that, you know, there's certain areas where I believe that we need to pay a lot of attention to. One of those areas is an area relating to newborn babies. Newborn babies typically, over 70% of them when they're born with jaundice, which is their inability to metabolize bilirubin in their bodies. Now, the old way of treating them was to put them in the sun. But actually what we needed was a specific wavelength of light, which is blue, to treat them to help decrease the amount of bilirubin in their bodies. Now, at GE, we've actually created these LED phototherapy lights, which emit light at about 450 nanometers, which is the blue light, and that is used to treat most newborn babies.
Was that cooked up in Africa, or was this cooked up in some lab in?
Well, because the GE is such a large company, this is a challenge right across the world. So we've got Chinese, we've got a company of the companies who's got Chinese elements as well as African elements, but we know that the fundamental use of this technology is going to be very, very helpful in Africa. And so the challenge exists in Africa. The innovation was done to create the solution.
Okay, you know you're my friend, but I've got to do this to you.
Go for it.
You guys, you multinationals, don't really find solutions for poor people. The truth of the matter is you're driven by profit, you're motivated by profit. It would be intellectually dishonest for us to sit here and say that if it's a poor man's disease, you're actually going to find a solution to it. You've given me one example of jaundice and that thing that you talked about, which sounds brilliant. But what about the rest of them?
So, I mean, when it comes to innovation, you really need to prioritize. Especially in healthcare, you've got to go for the big hitters. Like I said, more than 70% of all babies born in the world are born with this condition. And therefore, that is a good target for where to invest in infrastructure. Now, you talked about...
but you're driven by profit.
And I'm coming to that.
People in Uganda can't afford that LDE light you talked about.
Actually, no, they can, because the price point for this product is continuously going down. And this is a function of the large size of the company that we have, right? For instance, with this particular light, we've managed to reduce the amount of power that is needed to run the device. The nearest and biggest competitor is using 50 watts of light, of energy rather, to run this light.
Is it solar energy or is it just electricity? Because that's a problem in itself. There isn't a lot of electricity around.
No, it's actually electricity itself.
Oh, Lord. Doesn't that make it more difficult?
No, our product is actually only using 20 watts of light to run the same product. And not only that, our product has got a 50,000 hours of light within a single device as compared to the 20,000 hours that the competitor has. Now, when you talk about the price point of this particular product, this is where the health economics kicks in. Maybe our price point may be a bit more than the competitor, but in the long run, when you look at the whole value chain and the total cost of ownership, that product is going to be much more cheaper, because at 20 watts of power over 50,000 hours compared to 50 watts of power on 20,000 hours, what you're getting is two exchanges.
I told you he's a salesman.
Product.
Are you pitching? Are you pitching something?
I'm not pitching.
Okay.
I'm talking about the things that we need to consider when we purchase our products.
Okay, Denver PHIRI, if you want to buy anything, he can sell you. He can sell fridges to Eskimos. But I want to bring this lady up. Her name is Margaret. Please come up. I want her to get a microphone as quickly as possible, please. We don't have too much time. Let's give her a microphone. And I want you to tell me what you said earlier on about sort of going back to traditional African practices and finding solutions in that. You mentioned something and it clicked when one of these guys here was talking. She likes the limelight. Yeah, you can sit there.
Well, thanks, Alan.
This might be the only question I ask you, though.
Yeah, no, but I'm so glad you invited me here, because I was going to plead for you to let me talk. Actually, this was supposed to be my panel in the first place, but I didn't know if I was going to be able to make it till Sunday.
Okay, what is the point, though? Let's get to that point.
So anyways, I knew all of these guys were going to talk about technology this and technology that, which is all great. But I think the title of this was Reverse Innovation, so something coming out of Africa going to the rest of the world, and where most of us are thinking, think about it today. The world has never been this sick. The Western world has never been this ill. And in terms of food, in terms of beverages, in terms of ways of life, you know, we have so much here from our...
Like what? Like what?
Like beverages. My first company was a beverage company with the bisap, the hibiscus and the ginger drink. My second company, the one I'm building now, Tiosan, is all based on the ancient knowledge of the traditional healers of Senegal. I'm not just selling an ingredient to the Americans, I'm selling them a know-how, how we were using these ingredients from day one. The baby massage from Senegal, what it does, all of that stuff. And so the world is really ready and they're hungry for this stuff, right? And even the way we treat death and grieving, when my first husband passed away, I was shipped back home to deal with my elders, and they helped me, and I never had to touch Prozac or anything like that to deal with my grieving.
Normally we
This
look
is
at...
what we have to bring back to the rest of the world.
Okay. I'm in charge of this panel now. When we look at these guys, when we look at traditional healers, we sort of spiritualize them, and we start talking about them being witch doctors and Christian. And how do you get beyond that mindset to introduce people to that?
It was really, really hard, because when you were asking earlier about the state of brand Africa, did you know that when I first started on my labels, I made a point to never use the word Africa, and to never, even at first, it was hard to use the word healers, because those words, Africa and healers, it's been hijacked by all the negativity. So I focused on Senegal. I'm like, this is Senegal, and I went for the traditions, and it's an art of just marketing.
Denver, how do you work with her? How can you work with her? How can you make music together?
So the idea and the concept of innovation requires a lot of different minds and a lot of different concepts.
She's got some... Okay, go on. Go on. No, go. Yeah.
No, I said the idea of innovation is not unique to one single individual. We need to work together to come up with solutions.
I understand working together, but you see, you're part of a pharmaceutical world and all of that stuff. Actually, I almost see you guys as one of my worst enemies when it comes to some of the things I want to bring to the world, right? You almost don't want me in existence.
Is that true, Denver?
No, not at all. I think...
Okay, you can now sit down there, because you're going to make this discussion very difficult.
Hey, I'm with her, by the way. I'm with her.
Okay, Ivor, I'm coming to you in a minute. I'm coming to you. But Denver, do fight for your corner. Let's hear it.
No, look, there's no corner to fight for. We're all trying to do the same thing in different ways.
Okay, let's hear it. In your mind, how do you explain, how do you work with existing innovations on the continent, like what she talked about?
Yeah, like I said to her earlier, when babies were born, initially we used to stick them in the sun. Right? And
so you learned from that?
We learned from that it was not the whole spectrum of light that was needed to treat them, but just the blue light at 420 nanometers. And now we've specifically pulled out that particular light to help treat them faster. But a lot faster than the sun could treat them, and obviously it's more children can be treated in any given time.
And I think this plays into intellectual property that Carlos was talking about earlier on. She has a brilliant idea. She takes it to the rest of the world. Ivor finds out about it. He takes it, puts money into it, and then it becomes an international product rather than one that comes from Senegal. Isn't that usually the case with you, venture capitalists, Ivor?
So I have to tell you, I'm completely with her. Reverse innovation is about us as Africans believing in our ability to come up with ideas, come up with concepts, come up with products for the rest of the world. No disrespect to my colleague over here, but I'm not interested in technology developed in Europe and in the United States that comes to Africa. And I'm not that interested in technology developed in China that's coming to Africa. I'm interested in stuff we do here.
Are you going, now this is the key question. Do you need money?
Always.
Need money.
Everybody always needs money.
What would attract you to work with someone like that?
So there is absolutely a problem in access to capital on this continent. There is no question about it. Our biggest handicap is the fact that it is very difficult for young people like this to find capital easily. And we have to fix that. So if she finds me and is lucky enough to get through my myriad of secretaries and get to me, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to look for an idea that can go from Africa to the rest of the world. Because if it can work in the rest of the world, it'll definitely work in Africa. And then it's a case of helping to create a business plan that is going to be sustainable and is going to work. You know, our biggest export on this continent is people.
Is
People. Africa is reverse innovating every single day. If you walk down the production line at Boeing, you will find Africans. If you walk through the top medical facilities in the United States, you will find Africans. If you walk into some of the top research facilities in Europe, you will find Africans. Why can we not encourage those Africans to do that level of innovation right here in Africa?
yes, sir.
And that's our challenge.
Let's Dr. Lopez.
Well, we are getting excited here, which is good.
He's usually very calm.
No, but let's try to put these pieces of the puzzle together, because I think it's very important for us to structure a bit these different ideas. Okay, we do have to realize that for the most specialized manpower, the skilled labor is a universal market. You may have problems with people crossing the Mediterranean. You may have problems with people crossing Greek islands. There is no problem for software engineers to cross the Mediterranean or the Greek islands. Universal market for skilled labor means that you are going to find in the most sophisticated areas of innovation people from all over the world, including Africans. So this is no mystery about it. But we need to understand why this process of liberalizing trade through goods, services, capital has not attained the level where we liberalize for all people movement. It's only for a segment, the skilled labor. And that has to do with the way we distribute power in the world. When you are growing your economy very fast, like we are doing now in Africa, and we can just take the example of China slowing down, your first asset is to have a lot of people. But as you move on in the chain, you will realize that societies age. So every single society that has been a big innovator, let's take Japan, is aging very fast, and therefore they have to concentrate their power no longer in production, but in the possibility of controlling the software part, and that means intellectual property. And that is the reason why in Africa we have about 46,000 patents registered per year, when in a country like the United States you have 8 million. And we have 8 million. Or in Japan you have 6 million. In China you have 5.5.
Why is there such a huge difference? Exactly. What needs to be done?
Because intellectual property is the mother of protecting invention and innovation.
Okay.
So how do we respond to the challenge of BSAP? The way we respond to the challenge of BSAP is not different from what I was mentioning Ethiopians did with their coffee. It's a product that has value beyond just the beans. Because, you know, we have to realize Starbucks spends on beans less money than it spends on marketing. The marketing of Starbucks is more costly than all the beans they purchased every year.
That's incredible. Now,
And that is the reason why we can have this discussion and get excited about the good things that we have in the continent. But if we don't have the instruments and the tools that are going to allow these things to happen, we are kidding ourselves.
Okay.
We'll have isolated success stories.
but that
Now,
needs to be harnessed.
Yes.
It needs to be aggregated.
And the issue that permeated all discussion is the issue of financing. How do we finance this? Let me tell you how we finance it. Because we also think that Africa does not save enough and doesn't have enough money. Rubbish.
The Egyptians just paid for the Suez
Rubbish.
Canal.
What is happening is the following. Just between sovereign funds and central bank reserves, Africans have $500 billion. Of these $500 billion, they have to put them in asset class investments that do not invest in Africa. Because according to the rules of the IMF and others, they have to put it in safe AAA investment vehicles. There are no safe AAA investment vehicles investing in Africa. So these savings from Africa are contributing to the good of other people. That's just one. Then you have the remittances. Africans transfer about $60 billion of remittances every year. Our diaspora contributes more than development aid, which is about 50 billion. We pay the highest taxes for transfers anywhere in the world. And I can go on with the list, and you will end up with a figure that is close to $1 trillion of savings that, if it was properly managed and structured, would be capable of taking care of the startup problems that Samir was mentioning, and or the private equity funds that will be specialized and all that. But we need to be careful about, just having these flare-ups of success. We need to have consistent policies.
Okay, let's give him a round of applause, Dr. Lopez, and then IVOR, please come in.
See, I agree with you, but I have one serious problem with what you're saying. And that is that we have to first have a culture of investing in African innovation on this continent. I've seen Africans invest in American innovation, Chinese innovation, Japanese innovation long before they invest in innovation on this continent.
But it's safer.
You're 100% correct. The capital is there, but the financial institutions, the private investors have to have confidence in our own ability. The thing that is holding us back the most on this continent is lack of faith in our own ability. It's
okay,
ladies
but
like this.
Hold on a second, IVOR. What do you mean faith?
We have...
why do you want to have faith when you might lose your money? What is faith?
I don't think it's got anything to do with making or losing money. I think it has to do with confidence in our ability to create our own successes. How do you create faith? You create faith through a generation of people who believe in their own capability. We have been told by the world for years and years and years that they're better than us. And the problem is that there's a whole generation of people out there that believe it, and it's not true. The next generation is going to be our salvation because they don't believe it. They believe that they're global citizens. And those are the people that are going to take us to the next level.
Okay, this discussion will go on for a while. Dr. Lopez, very briefly, you seem to agree.
It's just a word. You have just agreed with what I said. You don't have a problem with what I said. You agreed with what I said. What I'm saying is that we have $1 trillion of savings that is not used in the continent.
Okay, now, what we need to do, I'm going to come to you guys in a minute. You're not just spectating here. I want you to, Karim, to think about, Samir, to think about the diaspora, people like my brother Denver, who are doing a lot of great work away from the continent, and how that can be harnessed to make a significant contribution. Dr. Lopez talks about $60 billion coming into the continent every year. What more can be benefited from the diaspora?
I
think it's not only the wealthy diaspora that can help and promote and adopt the innovations. I believe that Africa is an emerging continent, so you need to be able to make visible the success stories. There are today two model regions when you talk about reverse innovation. It's China and India, by the way. Who is the president of Google? It's an Indian guy. Why is that so? Because in the Silicon Valley, 30% of Apple engineers are Indian. Because India has, and here you have such a concentration of skills and talents that is happening in the Silicon Valley. Now, why should we base on our success stories for Africa? There are solutions, there are startups, which now are technological giants, and I will give an African example. If you look at WeChat, which is a kind of Chinese WhatsApp, WeChat is now disseminating in Europe and also in the States by targeting directly the Chinese diaspora, which is using it, which is spreading it, even towards non-Chinese, European and the US, because it's more practical, because you can blog, you can book, you can blah, blah. Uganda. One African example, which is interesting. Everybody knows Nando's. It's the restaurant chain in Africa. It's more Mozambique. Cooking, by the way, but they have worked a lot on marketing diaspora, and this should be inspirative to everyone in Africa. You must open restaurants where there is a lot of African community. For instance, they started in London. You even have these shops now in Singapore, and that's how they started, with one shop in Johannesburg.
And MANKOU, I know you want to pick up on that point, but I also want you to answer for me the issue of education, what role it plays in all this, because you're already running a business in Brazzaville, in Congo, and I wanted to, whatever point you want to pick up on, I wanted to also add education to what you want to say, and how important or significant it is in ensuring that people have the right skills to scale what you're achieving in Congo.
Bon, mais vous savez, aujourd'hui on parle tous
Well, you know, we all talk about the Silicon Valley. In Africa, we want to copy the Silicon Valley. Well, the culture is different. When you look at the American system, with young generation being used to innovation when they're kids, here in Africa, the only practical thing you do in college is sports. I mean, we need a lot of athletes in Africa, but we need to also bring in as early as possible this culture of innovation. And this is true either in Francophone countries or Anglophone countries. Innovation are more based on the non-real system. I want to say something about diaspora. If we want to make sure that this diaspora helps our continent, they need to change their mindset, because at the moment they just send money. No, diaspora needs to work together to fund projects. For instance, in Morocco, diaspora is a tool which Moroccans use outside the countries. But so far, the diaspora only takes care of its own relative, his or her own relative. And that's a problem. They need to change the mindset. Denver.
Do you think organizations like yours actually have a role to play in supporting innovation on the continent? And I wonder how you see that evolve.
We certainly do.
Is there an appetite?
Well, there definitely is an appetite. Currently, we had a leadership seminar in Addis Ababa where we brought in ministers of health and various other elements of people who work in healthcare. And the key question that was asked to these people is, if you had $1 million today, what would you spend it on? 77% of them said education. And as a result of that, GE is actually investing a lot of money into education for that particular purpose, because we understand that by getting more people to get the education that they need, they can help us to actually innovate in whatever we're doing. The field is very open. We're all working together. We learn from each other. Okay. Ivo talked about the work that, us doing stuff from other parts of the world. In actual fact, last year I talked about how we were doing research with midwives. And since then, we've now invented a new product based on the research that we did here in Africa. And we've also actually integrated information and knowledge from the aircraft industry around modular exchange and stuff. So we're definitely learning together, we're building together, and we're growing together.
And Ivo, billionaires like you, when they're looking for projects to fund, what are the 2-3 things that young people listening right now need to do in order to attract guys like you's money?
It's actually a lot less complicated than you may think. Venture capital is looking for innovative, new ideas. We're looking for people with energy, and we're looking for people with concepts that can be implemented and turned into successes. Innovation only comes with sustainability, and the first thing we look for is there an economic imperative that is going to make it sustainable? It's not that complicated, but it has to be driven by practicality. I'm very excited by the innovation that I'm seeing out of the generation that is now emerging on the continent. There's no shortage of innovation. There's a shortage of capital. We need to go and better harness the market so that the capital is made available, and we need to make that capital to young people, and we need to get Africans to be prepared to invest their equity in African projects. We mustn't keep looking outside for investment in Africa. We need to invest ourselves.
Let's give my panel a round of applause. Come on, we can clap louder for them. I've got to say thank you very much to Dr. Carlos Lopez, to Samir Abdelkrim, founder of startupbricks.com. Go to check out that website. And also to my friend VERONE MANKOU, who is CEO and founder of VMK from the Republic of Congo. Denver PHIRI, Health Economic Specialist, GE Healthcare, based in the United Kingdom, covers the whole of Africa. And finally, last but not least, IVOR ICHIKOWITZ, who is the founder and executive chairman of Paramount Group from South Africa, and also flyafrica.com. That's a brilliant idea, and we hope that it works. Thank you very much. Let's give him all a round of applause. My name is Alan KASUJJA, and thank you very much. And there's a cultural evening that's going to have entertainment. It's taking place right outside the tent and in the stadium, and we'd like you to attend that. And if you'd like to come in tomorrow, we kick off at 9 a.m. sharp. Thank you.